Every system claims to serve the public while spending responsibly. Monarchies and republics alike promise restraint, transparency, and purpose. But appearances deceive. Monarchies look costly because their expenses are visible. Republics look thrifty because theirs are scattered. In truth, the difference often lies not in money, but in storytelling. After all, the President of the People's Republic or whatsoever may wear $50 jeans to signal humility, but he spends weekends in a privately secured dacha worth more than a royal palace, built on a $1,000 official salary. Visibility shapes perception. People forgive what they cannot see and condemn what they can. A monarch's expense is printed, audited, and argued in parliament in front of everybody. A president's spending hides behind departments, party accountants, and third-party donors. One gets called extravagant for publishing the bill, and the other earns praise for keeping it off the books. In constitutional monarchies, accountability works through predictability. In republics, the same obligations are dispersed through agencies and campaigns, leaving everyone responsible and no one accountable. Problems can easily be solved by printing more money. The true, real cost of leadership is not what the office spends, but how it resists the urge to pretend it is spending less. In monarchies, spending follows structure rather than impulse. Budgets are fixed, audited, and debated in public view. A monarch inherits authority but not control over treasury. The arrangement is older than democracy but more transparent than most elected offices. Britain remains the clearest example. When George III ascended the throne in 1760, he surrendered the income from the royal estates to Parliament in exchange for fixed allowance. These lands became the Crown Estate, a public trust held in right of the Crown. The monarch may neither sell nor personally claim its holdings. Profits flow directly into treasury. In return, a small portion, the sovereign grant, funds official duties. It currently stands at 12% of Crown Estate profits, equal to £132 million for this year. And each year, the National Audit Office certifies the accounts as true and fair. The irony is that the royal family could, by law, reclaim the entire Crown Estate and live richly from its revenues. They choose the opposite. They hand majority of the income to the nation and accept a fraction back. It is one of the few examples where power deliberately limits its own privilege. This ethic of restraint once guided smaller monarchies too. In early 20th century, in Serbia, King Peter I Karađorđević requested a state loan to build a residence. His finance minister, Lazar Pachu, declined. He explained that the treasury could not lend to the sovereign without burdening taxpayers should the king die or abdicate, and advised him to seek a bank loan like any other citizen. The Karađorđević family's later wealth came not from state, but from marriage. When King Alexander I wed Princess Maria of Romania in 1922, her dowry and money she brought with herself for personal finance strengthened the young Yugoslav court, meaning they built through alliance, not extraction. The same principle holds elsewhere. In the Netherlands, royal expenses reached about 58 million in 2024 and were verified by the Court of Audit. In Sweden, palace administration totaled 82.8 million kroner, fully itemized. Each figure is published, argued, and defended. The sums are modest compared with the total state budgets and very visible to every taxpayer. Now let's look at how republics are doing. Republics, on the other hand, manage power through massive bureaucratic dispersion. Budgets pass through ministers, agencies, and committees until responsibility dissolves into process. Each layer adds its own agenda and paperwork. What looks transparent on paper becomes fog in practice. The visible costs like office or residence are modest. The invisible ones, such as campaign favors, idiotic partisan projects, and patronage networks, drain billions and make you, the citizen, poorer. Brazil's Operation Car Wash showed how the system behaves. More than $2 billion in direct bribes were traced, and total losses reached 42 billion across the Petrobras network. The system didn't fail because of one corrupt official. It actually performed exactly how it was designed, dispersing guilt so widely that no one could fully own it. In South Korea, Park Geun-hye, once elected on promises of reform, allowed her confidant to solicit tens of millions of dollars in donations from the country's largest companies in exchange for political access. Corporations treated it as an unofficial tax on doing business with the presidency. In Peru, former President Alejandro Toledo took kickbacks from the Brazilian construction firm for awarding infrastructure contracts. In Serbia, corruption became the economy itself. During the 1990s, Slobodan Milosevic built a network linking politics, crime, and commerce. Cigarette and fuel smuggling under sanctions generated hundreds of millions in cash outside of the budget. He ended up buying a villa in Dedinje, this is the elite part of Belgrade, the capital, for a token sum of a couple of €1,000, while state firms served as private banks for his loyalists. Patriotic economics ended as organized theft. After 2000, when Milosevic was removed from power, faces changed a bit, but habits basically remained. Presidents and ministers promised reform while quietly enriching themselves and their allies. The pattern extends across all the post-Soviet and post-revolutionary world. In Russia, Belarus, Tajikistan, Venezuela, Iran, Pakistan, and many others, presidents rule by distributing favors through loyal bureaucracies while preaching sacrifice to citizens. Wealth flows upwards and accountability drains downwards. Any criticism becomes national treason, and corruption turns from crime to culture. That habit is no longer confined to autocracies. Western systems show some version of the same decay. Inside the European Union, layers of procedure now hide decisions as effectively as censorship once did, to the level that they cannot even produce contracts to the auditors. The president of commission can negotiate multi-billion euro contracts over private messages, delete them, and they face no consequences. Instead of scandal, she gets re-elected. And instead of restraint, more spending, more committees, more distance between decision and responsibility. In form, it is democracy. In practice, it is bureaucracy protecting itself. This is what happens when persuasion replaces purpose. Once survival depends on image, money stops serving people and starts serving narrative. What was public service now becomes public relations. So, why is all of this? Monarchies and republics manage responsibility in different ways. In monarchies, accountability is built into structure, not because monarchs are good people above the things politicians do, but because system, through thousands of years of iterations, led us here. Now, budgets are predictable, public, and pre-approved. In republics, accountability disperses through layers of procedure, oversight turns reactive, and reaction turns political. When everything is everybody's job, nothing is truly anybody's fault. Modern bureaucracy often mistakes motion for wisdom. To reduce plastic waste, regulators in Brussels force bottle caps to remain attached to bottles, a rule that increased waste and irritation in equal measure. To save energy, several European cities dimmed streetlights until accidents rose. Such policies emerge from systems that fear scandal more than failure. When authority is inherited, temptation must be managed. On the other hand, when power is elected through favors and branding manipulations, temptation must be resisted. And resistance is rare, especially if you want to be elected again. The tragedy is that many modern monarchies, which are in practice becoming crowned republics, have begun imitating the very logic they once restrained. Politicians brand it as modernization, but in reality it is regression. The crown that once corrected excess now has no power and it can only observe. The result is not monarchy with democracy, but crowned republic, a system with royal ceremony seen as tourist attraction, and republican behavior, where the duty to intervene has been replaced by the right to remain silent. Corruption is not born from monarchy or republic alone. It is born wherever temptation meets opportunity without any consequence and where governments can print money or issue debt without non-partisan restraint. When citizens see every reform turn into another spectacle, fatigue replaces trust. Cynicism becomes a kind of self-defense. People stop expecting honesty. Unfortunately, systems that detach power from duty do not collapse overnight. And in the ideological world that republics built, collapse no longer meant replacing one king with another. It means revolutions, confiscations, and redistribution of power where ordinary citizens pay the price for elite failure. Watch more monarchies videos on this channel. If you have an idea for a new topic, share it in the comments. Many of the videos here began with suggestions from viewers like you. To support this work, you can subscribe on Patreon or become a YouTube member. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.